Welcome to this Tutor to You A-Level Sociology Revision Blast on Culture and Identity as part of the AQA A-Level specification. In this revision blast we're going to look at the impact on identity formation. In this revision blast we're going to focus on the last two specification points on the culture and identity specification. That is the relationship of identity to age, disability, ethnicity, gender, nationality, sexuality and social class in contemporary society, and the relationship of identity to production, consumption and globalization. Our first activity in this revision blast is a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This is where we ask you to name 5, name 4, name 3, name 2 and then name 1 inside of 2 minutes. What we are looking for you to identify are 5 different identities that are mentioned across the specification, 4 social institutions that shape identity, 3 impacts of globalization, 2 researchers who will look at gender identity, 1 theorist associated with Asian identities. You have 2 minutes to answer these questions, starting now.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Five, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And time's up. Let's look at our responses. So 5 different identities that are mentioned on the specification: ethnic identities, national identities, age, social class and gender. You can also have disability and sexuality. 4 social institutions that shape identity: religion, family, education, media. 3 impacts of globalization: media saturation, which of course has an impact on identity formation, growth of technology and migration. 2 researchers who look at gender identities. Well, we've got Oakley, who looks at the process of gender socialization, and Mack and Guile, who looks at the crisis of masculinity. And 1 theorist associated with Asian identities. A whole range that you could have had here. I've gone with Tariq Madood. In our connection spinner activity, we are going to look at the impacts of globalization on different types of identity. So we're taking globalization from the last specification point and applying it to the different types of identity formation in the penultimate specification point. This is what you may have to do on the outline and explain 10-mark questions on paper 2, where you're looking to make links between 2 distinct specification points. So we're looking for the impact of globalization on disabled identities, social class identity, gender identity, ethnic identities, age identities, and national identity. I'm going to spin it round and see where it lands. So the impacts of globalization on national identity. Okay, so give yourself a few moments to have a look through. So give yourself a few moments to think about an answer there, and then we will reveal our answer. How might globalization impact on a national identity? Thinking back to the features of globalization we mentioned in our previous activity. If you do need any more time during this revision blast, just press pause. However, our answers were, well, we could have increased multiculturalism, or you could have the opposite and you could have more xenophobic attitudes. People displaying things like Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, attitudes that are against those from groups that are different to mainstream, to the majority of the population. However, you could also have increased multiculturalism in society, and therefore your national identity becomes more multicultural. Let's spin again and see what else we can come up with. So again, we're looking at the impact of globalization, only this time we are focusing on ethnic identities. Okay, so this one might be a little bit more straightforward. If we think about the concepts of globalization, how might it impact on ethnic identities? Okay, the answers we went with were the creation of hybrid identities, and we'll talk about this a little bit later on, but how identities can become mixed, and also dual identities. This is where an individual may present with one identity at home and another identity outside. Quite typical from Asian families, this. But what they will do is they will engage with the culture and traditions of the family, but then will lead a more westernized lifestyle and when they're with their peers. In our 60-second challenge, you have 60 seconds to match the description of a research to those who conducted it. We're going to match the letters on the left with the numbers on the right. Now, we've got 5 pieces of research here that have looked at Asian or black identities. And what we want you to do is to match them up to the researcher. So let's discuss the research. Suggested young British Pakistanis refer to themselves as Muslim, and it provides a more positive identity for them. The development of British Asian identities that have recognition of both Asian and British cultures. Suggested the existence of a Black Atlantic identity. Suggested Asian identities are rooted in traditional cultures, language and artifacts. And suggesting the wearing of a hijab was to identify with having a Muslim identity. And our researchers down the right are Tariq Madood, Paul Gilroy, Jahal, Jacobson and Heidi Mirza. You have 60 seconds to match up the researcher to what they found. And time's up. Let's match our researchers to the research. So it was Jacobson who suggested that young British Pakistanis refer to themselves as Muslim as it provides a positive identity for them, usually as a response to racism that is received, particularly in social institutions such as education. Very similar findings were conducted by Louise Archer at the turn of the century as well, finding that young British Pakistani men were more likely to identify as Muslim than either being a British or Pakistani. Development of British Asian identities that have recognition of both Asian and British culture was Johal. Used the phrase Brasian as an amalgamation of British and Asian. What they found is that at home they were very much ingrained into their traditional Asian culture, but when they were out with their peers they were more likely to adopt more British and westernised attitudes. Gilroy suggested the existence of a Black Atlantic identity. The Black Atlantic identity combined elements of European, African, Caribbean and American culture together. Suggested Asian identities are rooted in traditional cultures, language and artefacts. That was Tariq Madood. And suggested that wearing the hijab was to identify with having a Muslim identity. That was Heidi Mirza. In our bubble quiz, you're going to be asked a question and a number of answers that are correct can range from 0 to all 4. What you need to do is mark down the correct answers. So our first question, which of the following do we associate with the study of disabled identities? Hall, Shakespeare, Barnes or Gilroy? Which of those looked at the study of disabled identities? Now, of course, this may vary from textbook to textbook based on which one you are using or which type of resources you're using. The correct answer is B and C. Tom Shakespeare and Barnes both looked at the study of disabled identities. Barnes largely focused on representations of disabled people in the media. Shakespeare looked at the ways in which the label of disabled can become a stigmatized identity, and we should replace this with terms like impairment. Question number 2, which of the following are new forms of male identity? Retrosexuals, metrosexuals, the new lad and the new man. The correct answer is all 4. Retrosexuals were seen as being a reaction to males becoming more metrosexual, and therefore they went back to traditional ideas. Metrosexuals were more heavily styled, certainly something that came about in the late 1990s, early 2000s, with the influence of gay culture on straight men and the way that men started to dress better, use more styling products and look after themselves better. The new lad, which is seen as being a reaction to the ladette, often associated with the lad mag culture of the late 1990s and early 2000s. And the new man, which was seen as being a reaction to second wave of feminism, where men would become more sensitive, more empathetic, and took more interest in family and relationships than in previous generations. Which of the following are examples of hegemonic masculinity? A. Stoicism, B. Subordination, C. Empathy, or D. Aggression? And the correct answers are A and D, Stoicism and Aggression. Concept of hegemonic masculinity described by Raywin Connell and also by James Messerschmidt. Which of the following researchers researched youth subcultures? McRobbie, Hall, Cohen or Hebdige? And the correct answer is all four. Angela McRobbie looked at female subcultures. Hull, along with Jefferson, looked at youth subcultures. Stan Cohen, obviously famously, looked at youth subcultures with the Mods and the Rockers and Folk Devils and Moral Panics. And Hebdige looked at the concept of bricolage and punk subcultures. And finally, which of the following key terms are linked to elderly identities? Active aging, bricolage, status frustration, and the third age. And the correct answers are active aging and third age. Concepts with changing perceptions of elderly identities, particularly with older people becoming more active consumers and being involved in more outdoor pursuits. In the Chili quiz, you'll have 30 seconds to answer 3 questions. Each question has a different level of activity as rated by our Chili rankings below. Our mild is green, orange is spicy, and red is hot. Let's look at our 3 questions. So our mild question is a term given to a sense of normlessness according to Durkheim. Our spicy question is ways in which visitors to an area have different experiences from the locals according to Uri. And our hot question, a loose and fluid connection of individuals who have a common interest according to Bennett. 60 seconds. Can you name the terms? And the 60 seconds is up. So let's look at our responses. Okay, our mild question, a term given to a sense of normlessness according to Durkheim, is obviously anomie. Ways in which visitors to an area have different experiences from the locals according to Uri is the tourist gaze. And our hard or a hot question was loose and fluid connection of individuals who have a common interest according to Bennett are neo-tribes. You may also have known this through Maffalosi. Neo-tribes being an alternative to a subculture where individuals don't conform to the same norms and values, but they do have interests. And what they may do is they may all meet up and then go off their separate ways. It's often used to describe things like festival goers and people who go to raves. That concludes this Tutor to You A-Level Sociology Revision Blast on Culture and Identity, looking at impacts on identity formation as part of the AQA A-Level Sociology specification. Thanks for watching.